a lot of experts, us included, believe that your diet should fulfill your dietary needs, your nutrient needs. And these vegan diets, they don't, they can't. And then so people really can set themselves up for deficiencies if they're not careful.
It doesn't even matter, honestly, at that point, if you're eating like crap
Yeah,
and you haven't changed anything and you change one thing, your health is going to improve.
totally. So our last guest, we talked about plant-based diets with Dr. Colin, and we wanted to do a two-part series and follow up on that with this episode because there's really no greater debate in the nutrition world than vegan, vegetarian diets versus omnivorous diets and which are healthier. So we're just going to have a little chat today and give our perspective as a nutritionist and a registered dietitian. And so just let's get the conversation rolling, Carla. What should we talk about first, do you think?
I really admired that he wasn't super stuck in this 100% plant-based way of eating. Yeah. So, I really did appreciate that because I think that could have led to a different conversation with him. And so, I think you and I are both in the agreement that there is room, maybe even a necessity for some type of meat product. And specifically for women, I think that's kind of where I've seen the biggest outcomes, positive outcomes, when they include some type of animal product in their diet.
Yeah.
And it's typically when like their hormones start to go to shit or things start to get really out of whack. And I see them kind of lean towards this plant-based mode where it actually starts to hinder their healing and their symptoms rather than help them.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just always very pro like variety and diversity and not excluding anything unless you have an allergy or a sensitivity to it, essentially.
Yeah. And I think we could talk for a long time about this because we both have really strong opinions and a lot of perspective on this. Because in my experience clinically working with people who have been vegan, mostly vegan, not so much vegetarian, but vegan for long periods and have not supplemented properly, they come to me with a lot of deficiencies. And like you mentioned, their hormones are in the trash because animal foods provide a lot of nutrients that our body uses to build hormones and to build muscle and for amino acids for brain health. So oftentimes these people are so deficient because they haven't been supplementing, and it's almost impossible to get zinc and adequate B vitamins with a plant-based diet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And B12,
Yeah, B12,
that's a
like
big
the B
one.
vitamin. Yeah. And you need that for cognition and for nervous system balance. And zinc is one of the most crucial minerals for your immune system.
Yeah. And it's just more, I would say also, bioavailable, meaning that it's more
Yeah.
absorbable in the
Right.
food form. Rather, we always want to encourage food first rather than going straight to supplementation or using that as an excuse to doing something. And I found even with supplementation, and we've talked about this before, if your gut's not working, if it's not digesting properly, even supplements may not necessarily, do that big of a difference for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think like pumpkin seeds are the only real plant-based source of zinc. Anyway, enough about zinc. So what I wanted to say is that there have been a lot of studies done on vegetarians, and there's this kind of notion that we have that vegetarians live longer and vegetarians are healthier than meat eaters. And I want to point out here, and this is really important, that the studies that they have done on meat having it linked to cancer and other diseases, typically those studies, it's really difficult to perform studies on humans and nutrition because you can't account for other lifestyle factors. And what we know is people who eat, quote, the standard American diet, which is a pretty meat heavy diet, saturated fat heavy diet, very low in plant foods. Those people are more likely to lead sedentary lifestyles and drink more alcohol or perhaps even smoke. So you're going into it with subjects that potentially have these cofactors in their life that aren't necessarily healthy habits. And those are the people who tend to eat a more processed meat heavy diet.
Yeah.
Now, vegetarians, we talked about this in our last episode, have kind of what we call this healthy user bias. So if you eat a vegetarian diet, you're more likely to be more health conscious in general because you're eating a vegetarian diet for health and you're getting more plant foods, obviously, than a standard American diet eater. And you're more likely to engage in stress reduction, like meditation and exercise and yoga. So that's something that's really important with these studies, because people freak out when they see red meat is linked to cancer. And we have to be really careful and look at the study participants and what were their lifestyles like.
Yeah, exactly. I could not have said it better myself. There's just, yeah, there's so much bias in these studies and in these like stereotypical ideas that we have with vegetarianism and people who eat meat. And
Yeah,
there's such a spectrum, and it's really hard to pigeonhole everyone
totally.
to to a specific ideology. And typically the people like us who eat meat but also eat a lot of plants and can be almost, you could say, like plant-based but still
Yeah.
have some type of animal product, those are never in the studies.
Well, I was going to
So
say, yeah, I would love to see a study on a plant-based diet with appropriate amounts of animal protein. And
yeah,
I think we do. We have that with the Mediterranean diet, but it's a very like not very big on meat. They don't use a lot of animal
red meat.
products. Red meat, yeah.
Yeah, like
Seafood.
dairy, red meat. It's mainly seafood, exactly. Which I'm totally for, and I think it's a wonderful diet, and anyone can do it. But again, I don't think it's realistic accessibility for everyone to be eating seafood, depending on where you live or even the expense of it.
Well, that's true. And that's a really good point, of course. And I mean, that diet has been linked to longevity, and it's probably because it's olive oil heavy. It's got a lot of legumes for fiber and anti-inflammatory seafood like fatty fish, sardines, especially. So all of those are pretty much superfoods. But yeah, just so people out there know, like you and I, we eat what I would call a plant-based diet. Like I try to get 50% of my plate as vegetables, but I'm also aiming for 30 grams of protein per meal, because we know that for women our age, that is what's going to help build muscle mass, and muscle mass is linked to longevity.
Yeah, and also again, I mean, there's so much more that protein does than just build muscle mass, right?
Yeah.
We know it helps with blood sugar. We know it helps with energy. We know it helps, I would say, with mood. Like it really was a game changer for me. And so I understand that we don't have a protein deficiency in this country. I
Yeah.
really do, and we do have a fiber deficiency. That's not a question. However, I think the protein recommendation in terms of the RDA is still quite low, specifically for women who can benefit for a higher protein intake. And so I don't want to take away from that benefit by saying, oh, just because we don't have a protein deficiency in this country doesn't mean that you can't benefit from increasing your protein and actually seeing health benefits from it.
Yeah. And I want to point out, you brought up PCOS in the last episode and how increasing your protein has helped that. And I just want to call out the fact that increasing protein for specific conditions like insulin resistance and diabetes and brain health, even, and again, building muscle mass. So if you have genetically, are you predisposed to these certain conditions, or you have one of these conditions, increasing your protein can go a long way.
Yeah, and I do want to say, obviously, we know that plant-based foods have protein in them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I consume a lot of those, like beans and legumes and all that great stuff. However, I would never be able to reach my 100 grams of protein a day if I were just to rely on those sources. I would have to eat so
Yeah.
much because it's not significant to the point where I'm going to actually get there. Like you have a 4 ounce, just for example, like a 4 ounce chicken breast, it has 20 to 30 grams of protein in it. Where if you were to eat like a quarter cup of beans, that may be like maybe 5 to 10 grams of protein.
Right. Yeah.
So, there's a huge difference in terms of the quantity of protein. That doesn't mean that you can't get protein from plants. It's just, it may not get you to your goal as effectively.
Totally. You mentioned bioavailability. We know that meat and the nutrients in meat are more easily absorbed than plants. You also have to play around if you're a vegetarian to make sure you're getting complete proteins, combining beans with grains. Some people don't do well on these higher carb diets either. So I was a vegetarian for 13 years and I actually felt great until I didn't anymore.
Mm.
And it started messing with my hormones too. And all the soy was starting to mess with my digestion because soy can be really hard to digest. It causes a lot of bloating. So for me personally, once I started eating meat again, I'll never forget this. I was at a party and my friend made these chicken wings and I looked at them and I was like, oh my God, those look so good. Or they were drumsticks. They were like barbecue drumsticks that just come off the grill. And I grabbed one and started eating it. And everyone was like, what are you doing? You're a vegetarian. And I was like, oh my God, this is so good.
That's
and
so
like,
funny.
if your body is telling you need something, I'd been thinking about meat for a while and I just started going back to school studying this stuff. And I still think about that drumstick. It's like one of the best things I've ever eaten. And I know like,
That's great.
that's when I knew,
Yeah.
and I did see a lot of benefit from reintroducing animal protein.
Yeah, I have a similar experience where I was a vegetarian in high school when I was a competitive runner. I was on cross country and like I don't even know how I did this looking back, but like, we were running a shit ton, anywhere from like 50 to 100 miles a week. And our bodies at that age were like put under so much stress. And here I am trying to limit my calories, limit my my food groups. I was a vegetarian, as I mentioned, and I was starving myself. I was definitely exerting more than I was putting back in, and everything went to shit, like slowly, year after year, the more I was doing this. And I remember the same thing. My mom was making bacon one morning. And
that's always the gateway meat.
Yeah, it is. But that, man, my mouth could not stop salivating. I wanted that so bad, but my stubbornness and like persistence to just whatever, just ignore it and not give in. But eventually I did. I think maybe my senior year, I just, my body was crashing and I couldn't take it anymore. So, and it sucks because I never saw anyone professional. All I was doing was like reading health magazines, like Self, and just going by what they said. And unfortunately, I think there's this big marketing scheme around vegetarianism and veganism that it is the healthiest way to eat.
Totally.
Which, kind of sucks for a young, vulnerable teenager.
Yeah. Well, I just one quick note on that. I was a vegetarian in high school too. I went to an animal rights workshop and I'd never heard about factory farming before. And it was so alarming to me being an animal lover that I quit eating meat. So all I ate was ramen noodles and rice because I was vegetarian and I became severely anemic. And so that's actually what got me interested in nutrition. Because after that, I started reading books, like you said, about how to eat a proper vegetarian diet and food combining and how to get complete proteins. But the other thing too about vegetarian and vegan diets is they can tend to be heavy in processed fake meat foods like Beyond Burgers. I used to love those fake chicken nuggets.
Boca burgers.
Which ones?
Boca burgers.
Oh, Boca. Totally. Boca burgers were good.
Them. Yeah.
And I was putting like tons of soy milk in my smoothies. I was getting a lot of soy. So the thing about meat is it's a real natural product that doesn't contain any additives, and you're getting a ton of fillers and processed ingredients in these fake meat foods.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I would say the majority of people that I know that are vegetarians are not necessarily healthy vegetarians in terms of eating whole foods and choosing non-processed foods. A lot of it is very heavily carbohydrates, and they do have a lot of snack and processed foods in their diet because they're trying to find alternatives, right?
Totally.
And so when people give up food groups, it's not that they like it's not out of sight, out of mind. They're looking for alternatives because they're used to eating a certain way. And so they want something that's going to taste, feel, just pleasure wise, get the same experience. And unfortunately, that is going to typically be like a processed food.
Yeah, that always was curious to me is if you're a vegetarian, why do you want something that tastes like meat? The whole point is
that's a good point.
That's always weirded me out. But, and I should say, there's obviously a difference between vegetarianism and veganism. So veganism is zero animal products at all. You
Right.
shouldn't, you're not even supposed to eat honey. And like we said earlier, that diet requires supplementation. And so a lot of experts, us included, believe that your diet should fulfill your dietary needs, your nutrient needs. And these vegan diets, they can't. And then,
Yeah.
so people really can set themselves up for deficiencies if they're not careful. And it's easier in vegetarianism if you're a lacto-ova, especially, and you're doing dairy and eggs. But I can work with vegetarians and help them tweak their diets, but I don't typically work with vegans unless they're open to kind of changing their diet based on what their health concerns are.
Yeah, agree. It's very, very difficult. When I had private practice, it was mainly gut symptoms and a lot of skin issues, which is very much connected.
Oh yeah.
And oh my God, forget about it. If you have any kind of inflammation on your skin and you're a vegan, did not have one case where they got better. It didn't matter how much support I provided, how much supplementation. I really needed to switch their diet or bargain with them. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what can we like get into your diet that you're willing to consume? And at some point, it was just like, okay, I'll do bone broth. Okay, I'll do yogurt, something like that. But it was it was so much harder in terms of like healing and getting them to a place where they were actually happy and with the results.
Well, yeah. And along the way, maybe it was in school, I keep hearing there's no one diet that is right for you for your entire life. Your dietary needs change based on your age, your health status,
Mhm.
your activity level. So being a lifelong vegan, you're kind of just sticking to the same thing despite how your needs are evolving. And that's always something that I tell vegetarians and vegans is they have to be sensitive to that. Our protein needs actually increase as we get older, right?
Yeah, no, they do. I mean, to an extent, everyone's very different, right? Like if you're active, if you're not active, it's going to be different. Like even based on your height, weight, your all of that. So I think though, in general, for women, what I've seen is they benefit more as they age and as they increase
Yeah.
their protein because that's when they really need it. Because in my 20s, I wasn't eating protein like this, and my issues were not as bad. Your body can just function better. I don't know. It
Yeah.
survives better. It has more of the materials. And then as you get older, if you're not giving it, those raw materials that it needs in sufficient amounts, I think that's when it starts to act up more and more.
Totally. Yeah. Something that I also wanted to mention to change the subject just a bit is this is a very famous argument from vegans. And I follow a famous vegan cardiologist on Instagram.
Mm,
And he's constantly posting about how vegan diets are the only clinically proven diet to reverse heart disease. So I want to call this out a bit too, because let's think about the average person that gets heart disease potentially. And that for this study, actually, now heart disease is actually the number one killer for women. But in this study, it was older men who, again, had been eating a really highly processed food standard American diet. So when they cut out the junk and a lot of the saturated fat, they were probably exceeding the saturated fat needs and started eating plants, of course, your health is going to
yeah.
improve.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even matter, honestly, at that point, if you're eating like crap
Yeah,
and you haven't changed anything and you change one thing, your health is going to improve.
totally.
So
Yeah,
yeah, if you're eating a standard American diet and then all of a sudden you cut soda and that's the only thing you do, that's going to benefit you.
yeah.
And the more you start to take out the shittier things and bring in better things, it's it's just I don't know, it just makes sense, It's kind of
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So,
yeah.
and that was his recommendation was add in one new fruit or vegetable a week. And I told my clients that too,
Mm,
experiment because most people are only eating like the same five foods. And we need like this such a diverse array of antioxidants, which you get in brightly colored fruits and vegetables, and especially berries and different nutrients that, especially fiber too. So you can get those from your plants, and then you get your adequate proteins. And beef, for instance, has a lot of nutrients in it, not just iron and protein, but it's rich in zinc that we need, and B vitamins and micronutrients. So, you get a lot of what you would get in just taking like a multivitamin mineral in eating beef, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great quality protein. I think where a lot of our concerns come from and a lot of the studies are showing is the overconsumption
Yes,
of
exactly.
animal products and meat. And that I'm all for reducing. Like, do I think the average person eats way too much meat?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And too few veggies, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you can easily scale that back. There's nothing wrong with that. And, replace it with a vegetarian meal every now and again. Like, I encourage that. I think we see a lot less both health problems in people, and also as far as that goes in terms of environmental issues, like, if everyone ate a little less than they're supposed to be, or like having that meat at every meal, I don't think is necessary.
Yeah, I agree. And we were talking about this too, is just having like one vegetarian meal, or one vegetarian day per week. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm all for that. And then that increases your plant diversity and your fiber diversity. But I absolutely agree with you, as people are eating too many processed foods, too much meat, and too few veggies. And you need those. Those are the disease fighters, because those have your antioxidants. And
Yeah.
antioxidants fight free radical damage that changes your DNA and causes disease. So, and oxidation and inflammation. Those are your important foods for countering disease.
Yeah, and I think also, if you I'm not a huge red meat person,
Yeah, me neither.
and it's like I crave it around like my period, after my period. I think just given that, we lose so much blood that naturally we're craving iron.
Yeah.
And so that's typically when I eat it throughout the month. Otherwise, it's not really highly on my grocery list, just because of preference, to be honest. Like, I don't crave it other than that time. And what I do crave is seafood.
Yeah, me too.
And so that's honestly, when it comes to like meats, I don't even like chicken. Like, I'm so sick of chicken. I think it's so like
Yeah.
bland and whatever. Like, if I can, yeah, if it's a cheap source of protein, I'll get it every now and then again. But I really love fish, and I know that also has its consequences, but I try to even buy like the more cost effective, like fatty fishes, like sardines, and I've been all over mackerel lately because it's just so easy.
Mm.
And it comes in like olive oil, and it's such a great way, instead of like taking omega-3s every day, to just make sure that I'm like getting it in through my diet that way. And I felt really good, like just making those changes. So it doesn't necessarily have to be red meat or pork or chicken or whatever people think
Mhm.
it is. It can be these quote unquote healthier options, that have like really great fats and are affordable. I think, like a can costs maybe $2.
Totally, yeah. Speaking of red meat, let's talk about the carnivore diet. What do you think?
Mm. Oh my
Let's get a
God.
registered dietitian's opinion on the carnivore diet.
I thankfully do not know one RD that is pro this diet. I don't know who started it. I don't know where it came from. They are off their rocker.
It came from
Uh,
Michaela Peterson, who's controversial psychologist Jordan Peterson's daughter.
oh
She's the one that
God.
brought it to the spotlight. She used it to reverse like a number of autoimmune diseases, and it took off from there.
I'll say this. Working for two companies that were very much ketogenic, maybe not like in terms of how they stood out to everyone. They were very low carb, very close to being keto. And the culture that kind of took on in terms of how people praised animal products, praised meat, it didn't surprise me when I heard about this diet, because I just over the last few years, as the keto diet has been more and more
Mm,
popular, I
yeah,
feel like meat has been praised more and more. You're starting to find like this cult following for people who like just want to eat
it's a
meat.
total cult.
Yes, and it's so scary because as they start to rely on solely this, they start to exclude fiber completely from their diet, they start to exclude plants, and again, like you were saying, like antioxidants, any kind of, like, cancer-fighting chemicals that these plants have, like, their diet is solely just protein and meat, and I'm just losing my mind over here, like, just visually trying to understand what is going on in their bodies.
I have 2 comments on that, and one about is about fiber. You're totally right. I wanna see some long-term studies on carnivores who haven't eaten fiber in years and years and years, and what is the implication to your microbiome. So we know that fiber obviously feeds our probiotic bacteria, and they in turn ferment that and release byproducts called short-chain fatty acids that feed your colon cells and fight colon cancer. And the more we know that the more probiotic diversity you have in your gut, the healthier you are. So I'm curious about that, number one. And number two, the thing that I think is really unfortunate if you go on Instagram to a lot of these carnivore accounts is it's just an echo chamber. It's everybody saying the carnivore diet reversed all of my diseases or made my blood markers so much better.
Yeah.
But you're not hearing about the like hundreds of thousands, however many people have tried the carnivore diet and felt awful and it's ruined their health and maybe their inflammatory markers like CRP and LDL cholesterol, maybe those shot up and that's a risk factor for heart disease. So you're hearing all of these people that are just patting each other on the back, but you're not hearing all of the negative stories.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, and so many people fall for that, unfortunately, like, and it's sometimes even just like an N equals 1, like, "Oh, I heard about this person and their success and how much weight they lost," and that shouldn't be the motivation. I hate it
Yeah.
when, like, a diet comes out on the scene and people wanna do it specifically for weight loss, and I'm just like, "We have so many other strategies and tools that we can use for weight loss. You don't need to go to these extremes."
Yeah.
So, I would say to summarize all of this, it's not bad to consume meat, it's not bad to consume animal products. However, we do agree that the majority of your diet should be plant-based.
Mm.
And so that's what I would encourage people to do is, if you wanna be vegetarian for your own values, beliefs, whatever reasons, that's totally fine. Just be smart about it. Know that you do have to supplement with specific, nutrients. Work with a health professional every time you're going to change your diet so you know where the gaps lie and you know what you need to fill in. Um, but otherwise, make sure that you're reaching those fiber goals. And like you said, Mary, at the beginning, like half of your plate is plant foods. I think that's a really easy strategy to follow every time you're thinking about a meal or you're meal planning, you're looking at recipes, and how can you add more plants to the meal that you already have, maybe with meat
Mhm.
in it. It doesn't have to be, one or the other. It can be both in the right quantities.
Well said.